I'll take it from here.
You can't scare me, Batman.
Let me give you one word of advice.
Okay. I'll tell.
What did he say?
You don't want to know.
That's right, we're finally talking about Batman. The Dark Knight, our caped crusader, the world's greatest detective. We all know him and we all love him. For 86 years, Batman has built himself a reputation as one of the world's most beloved superheroes and made the characters around him iconic in their own right too. Over those 86 years, 7 different generations have come to love him through a number of different interpretations. Adam West in the 60s, Michael Keaton in the 80s, Christian Bale in the 2000s. There are so many reasons why we love this character. So today I want to talk about Batman and answer the question, why do we love Batman? But first, let's talk about the history. Batman debuted in March of 1939 and was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane for Detective Comics number 27. I'm sure I don't need to explain Batman's origin for you, but in the 86 years since its initial telling, the standard facts haven't deviated much from the original. Movie theater or sometimes an opera, crime alley, parents killed, so on and so forth. Batman was initially a violent, ruthless noir character that was inspired by characters like Zorro or the Shadow. But when Batman got his solo title in 1940, he brightened up a lot over the next decade with characters like Robin, Joker, and Catwoman all being introduced. He went from a vigilante with no problem killing to a hero with a rigid moral code to not kill. Over the 50s and 60s, Batman became brighter and campier. He joined the Justice League and got a bat dog, and this tone ended up reflecting heavily in the 1966 Batman show. This show was a lot of people's mainstream introduction to Batman. I remember being a kid and trying to talk to my grandma about superheroes, and she would show me clips of Adam West's Batman and George Reeves' Superman. These two shows were household staples for her and her siblings, but she was never a huge superhero fan. I think this shows just how appealing these characters are to a mainstream audience. After the Batman TV show was canceled in 1968, in the 70s the comics started to revert back to the gritty noir roots Batman had because of authors Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams. These two guys essentially defined our modern idea of Batman, combining the original dark detective stories of the Golden Age with the campy no-kill morals of the Silver Age. From the mid-70s on, Batman has typically stuck with the definition that Neil and Adams gave him. Denny O'Neil gave us so much lore that has grown to be extremely important in the Batman mythos. He introduced Ra's and Talia al Ghul and the Lazarus Pit, created Batman visiting Crime Alley on the anniversary of his parents' death, and defined Joker as the clown prince of crime, a force of chaotic nature that Batman has to face head on. I know the Denny O'Neil glaze is crazy right now, but he deserves a lot more credit than I've heard him get. Moving into the 80s, Batman only became darker and more popular. Batman Year One redefined his origin and fleshed out his early days. The Dark Knight Returns showed that Batman can be even darker and even more mature than he's ever been. And Tim Burton's Batman showed the world how valuable he is. So many iconic works came out of this period. And with Tim Burton's Batman being theatrically released to the world in 1989, Batman truly exploded into the mainstream. With a budget of $35 million, the movie was a huge success, making over $400 million worldwide. It was the second biggest movie of 1989, and it was a massive gateway into reading Batman comics for a lot of people. This was the first time Batman truly became a pop culture icon and cemented himself as a household name. In the 90s, Batman only became bigger and better. Iconic stories like Nightfall, No Man's Land, Dark Victory, and The Long Halloween were all written in the 90s and have all left a lasting impact on Batman. Nightfall, of course, introduced Bane, one of Batman's most iconic villains, and the story was later partially adapted in The Dark Knight Rises. And No Man's Land and The Long Halloween were both partially adapted for the Batman. Nightfall and The Long Halloween have especially proven themselves to be iconic pieces of Batman lore. And to talk a bit more about The Long Halloween, I'm going to let my good friend Milo take it from here.
Batman is the closest thing that modern comics has to last century detective stories.
We seem to forget the fact that Batman is the world's greatest detective, and I think the stories that highlight that the most are the Loeb sales stories, specifically Batman Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory, so slight spoilers for both. Long Halloween is a murder mystery set in Gotham, where Batman is trying to capture the holiday killer who strikes once a month on a specific holiday. The story spans 13 issues and starts on Halloween and ends on Halloween of the following year. The story takes place after the Frank Miller book Batman Year One, and it shows the origins of some of Batman's strongest alliances in his quest to rid Gotham of its crime. We see him working with Jim Gordon and how Jim Gordon kind of bends the rules so Batman can be present, and Harvey Dent, who kind of takes a legal approach to what Batman's trying to do in this book by taking down the Falcone crime family. Crime in this book is initially represented by Carmine Falcone and his family. The book even references The Godfather with scenes like Carmine smelling the rose, or when Falcone's nephew is shot in the bathtub, or when Bruce tells Falcone the phrase, "I believe in Gotham." We see a lot of film influence in the book, and this book also influenced a lot of film, like the Christopher Nolan movies, and more specifically, Robert Pattinson's Batman. Without yapping about the book too much, we see the takeover of crime in Gotham, and see how Batman went from taking down the organized crime families in Gotham to taking down the Iranian ambassador for the UN. Jokes aside, this change can be seen on a visual level, where the old crime that lingered over Gotham is being taken down in these pale black and white scenes, and the new criminals like the Joker, or Poison Ivy, or Two-Face are being shown in these vivid, colorful pages. Batman Dark Victory serves as the perfect sequel to Long Halloween, continuing the noir-inspired detective storytelling that Loeb and Sale excel at. Together, Long Halloween and Dark Victory stand as definitive Batman stories, embracing his detective roots while shaping the modern mythos of the Dark Knight. They are my favorite Batman stories. When I first read Long Halloween, I think I read it like 4 times, like in a row, just because it was so awesome.
While the 90s were a good decade for Batman in the comic books, he wasn't doing very well in the mainstream. 1992 was a good year for Batman, with Batman Returns being released theatrically and Batman the Animated Series debuting. While these were high notes for Batman, they would be some of the last ones for a long time for general audiences. In 1995 and 1997, Joel Schumacher took over as director for the Batman franchise, creating 2 sort of spiritual successors to Tim Burton's original movies. These movies were not and are not received well by fans and audiences alike. They took the camp of the 60s to 11 and combined it with egregious 90s toy marketing, leading to 2 disasters of Batman stories that would tank his mainstream popularity for the next decade. 1997 to 2005 were pretty quiet for Batman, although some of his most widely loved comics came out in the 2000s. In 2005, Christopher Nolan would start his redefining trilogy with Batman Begins. Batman Begins was a big success, making $375 million worldwide with a $150 million budget. It was the world's first introduction to a truly serious Batman. Tim Burton's Batman was dark, of course, but it was always very fantastical and ungrounded, and we all know the dumpster fire Schumacher's movies were. Begins showed the world that Batman is a compelling character to take seriously, and if they weren't convinced after watching it, 2008's The Dark Knight definitely convinced them. The Dark Knight was huge, making $1 billion worldwide with a budget of $185 million and becoming the 4th highest grossing movie at the time. I'm sure most, if not everyone watching has seen this movie, and for good reason. It gave us so many iconic performances: Christian Bale as Batman, Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon, and of course, Heath Ledger's legendary portrayal of the Joker. I can't say anything about this performance that hasn't been said already, but I do have to take a second to appreciate it. It's one of those depictions of a character that became defining but has never been able to be replicated, similar to Charlie Cox's Daredevil or Christopher Reeve's Superman. Heath Ledger gave an all-time amazing performance that largely drove the popularity of The Dark Knight. Since 2008, Batman has been an unwavering household staple because of this movie. Moving into the 2010s, Nolan ended his Batman trilogy with The Dark Knight Rises, a movie that was certainly a movie. I don't have anything really good or bad to say about it, but I just feel like Nolan had kind of told the story that he had wanted to tell, and Rises was tacked on to round everything out. There's nothing against Christopher Nolan here either. I'm a big fan of most of his work. It's just this movie feels open-ended and loose compared to Begins and The Dark Knight Rises. The 2010s were an interesting decade for Batman, both in the comics and the mainstream. In 2011, DC rebooted their entire comics universe with the New 52, and it lasted until 2016. I think that the New 52 started out pretty good, especially with Batman. Great stories like Court of Owls, Zero Year, and Requiem came out of the New 52, but it also spawned some controversial stories like Three Jokers, Super Heavy, and Last Night on Earth, which played largely into DC deciding to reboot the universe again with Rebirth in 2016. In 2013, the DCEU kicked off with Man of Steel, and our first introduction to this universe's Batman was in Batman v Superman in 2015. If you've seen my video on Superman, you know I have a lot of complicated feelings about the DCEU and this movie especially. Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman in itself was not bad. What I really have a problem with is the writing. Batman v Superman was written by David Goyer and Chris Terrio, and I think they had a basic overarching narrative for Batman that they wanted to pull off. We start with an older, more jaded version of the character who's lost his way. Then he sees Superman sacrifice himself and he realizes he needs to be the best version of himself. And finally, he achieves the best version of himself by forming the Justice League and defeating Steppenwolf. On paper, this is a great idea and a great arc for the character, but Goyer and Terrio's writing really got in the way of this story being great. Upon seeing this movie initially in 2015, it was an extremely confusing watch for most people. We had never seen Batman so blatantly violent, although in almost every film adaptation of him to date, he had been pretty violent. This is a quick caveat of Batman's portrayal in a lot of films that I want to talk about. I said earlier that Batman's had a strict no-killing rule and has for most of his history, and the movies really did not honor that. Burton's Batman just mowed through Joker's henchmen constantly, and Nolan's Batman could not be trusted around a villain in a high place to fall off of. I don't want to make it seem like Affleck's Batman was the first to kill. He was just the first to do it so brazenly, which was a shock to a lot of people. I think Goyer and Terrio just wanted their Batman to be the coolest Batman, and along with Zack Snyder's vision of the coolest Batman, they made something that just did not resonate with a lot of people. This trend with Batman not being portrayed accurately continued with 2017's Justice League, except this time around Batman had a hint of MCU humor to him that people did not like. I'll stop here with the negativity because I do have a couple positives to say about Zack Snyder's Justice League that came out in 2021. After a rough start with Batman, I would say that Zack Snyder certainly redeemed him in Justice League. It was an interesting position to see Batman in. He was like Nick Fury, but way better at boosting morale. And that final battle scene with him was amazing. It's easily my favorite Ben Affleck has looked as Batman. We are not even gonna talk about The Flash. Do not get your hopes up. Overall, Batman in the DCEU suffered because he was turned up to 11 in all the wrong spots. Where we could have dived deeper into losing Robin and his trauma, we got him branding criminals. The DCEU did not do a lot of its characters great justice, including Batman, but Zack Snyder's Justice League definitely helped redeem him. And the year after Justice League, in 2022, we got The Batman. This movie was a true landmark in Batman's filmography. The first movie to truly portray Batman as a detective, and in my opinion, the first Batman movie to feel very much like the Batman we know from the comics. Matt Reeves adapted a lot of books and storylines, like Year One, The Long Halloween, and No Man's Land, which definitely contributed to the comic book essence this movie has. I'm not saying it's entirely comic accurate, though. Matt Reeves has made it widely known that his take on Batman is a grounded one, and you can see that. The Riddler is based off of the Zodiac Killer, and Batman himself has a very militaristic, armored suit. The comic accuracy of the Batman lies entirely in the character's traits. He's a dark and tortured person seeking only vengeance at the beginning of the movie, and by the end of it, he learns that he can't protect anyone while seeking vengeance, so he needs to seek justice in order to be better. This isn't a complicated arc at all, but it works so well because we hear Bruce narrating his thoughts all throughout the movie. Doing this serves as a timeline, and with timelines there needs to be an end or a resolution, and we receive this in the form of Bruce changing his ways. Since this movie has been released, we haven't had a lot of Batman in the mainstream. We had an interesting last appearance in a movie that we will not be talking about, and a lot of convoluted news on the future of Batman in the DCU. We hear of the Batman Part 2 being delayed like every 2 months it feels like, and Brave and the Bold seems to be a story about an older, established Bruce Wayne discovering his son Damian and training him to be Robin, an adaptation of Batman and Son by Grant Morrison. Really quick, I just want to say that when I hear of any delay of the Batman Part 2, I am not upset. It took Matt Reeves 5 years to write the first movie, and I don't see why he would do anything different with the sequel. I understand that as an audience, time passing isn't ideal, but I can deal with a slightly older cast if the story is just as good as the first. It won't be a Stranger Things situation. Robert Pattinson is only 38, not 15. And as far as Brave and the Bold, I'm intrigued to see what could come of it. James Gunn seems to be promising a more fantastical universe, and I'm excited to see a take like that with Batman. But news about writing issues and director issues do make me worried. As with most movies, I'm cautiously optimistic, although seeing Superman in July will definitely affect my level of excitement for Brave and the Bold. Now that I am finally done yapping about the history, I can finally answer the question, why do we love Batman? I think everyone has a different reason and a different version of Batman that they love most. For some people, their favorite version is the Arkham series because they're able to experience what being Batman is like. For others, their favorite is Michael Keaton because they saw it in 1989 and it changed their lives. Batman is a character that demands a standard and sets an example for people to follow. I think a huge example of Batman teaching people and setting a standard is the DCAU Batman, Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy is my favorite Batman of all time, and I think that's something that a lot of people can agree with. To me, he defined the character. He was the first person to truly separate Bruce and Batman and understand the distinction between the two characters. Without Kevin Conroy, we never would have gotten Christian Bale's amazing Bat voice. His range as Batman is unmatched, and I don't think anyone has been able to show the angst, the intellect, and the care that Kevin Conroy did. Some of Batman's most compelling moments of all time have come from the DCAU. The scene in the graveyard in Mask of the Phantasm, the last moments with Ace in Justice League Unlimited, and Batman visiting Superman's grave in Justice League. Kevin Conroy and the amazing writers behind Batman the Animated Series gave us a truly defining take on the character that has grown to be my favorite and a lot of people's favorite version. Another piece of Batman media that people love is the Arkham series, and it's for a lot of the same reasons. The first 2 Arkham games were written by Paul Dini, who wrote for Batman the Animated Series and Justice League. To me, the Arkham games feel like playing a twisted, extended version of Batman the Animated Series, especially since these original cast members, Mark Hamill, Arlene Sorkin, and Tara Strong, all featured in the games as well. The Arkham series is held in the hearts of many, many people, and for good reason. It was a groundbreaking game for the superhero genre, and its many horror elements have had a lasting effect in cementing Batman as the dark, brooding character we all think of him as. Like I said earlier, Batman means a lot of things to a lot of different people. To me, he represents great resolve in how to hold your morals. I think one of the many reasons Batman is so beloved is because of the examples and the standards he sets. There's something amicable about going through something traumatic and making sure no one else will ever have to feel that pain, and protecting people because they deserve to be protected. Batman is a character that has stood the test of time, and he's one that I believe will continue to do so for a long time. I've always loved Batman, and in 86 years we've gotten so many versions of him that there was a different Batman that served different purposes to me as I grew up. When I was little, it was silly Batman like Schumacher and Brave and the Bold, and as I've grown up, my Batman has become serious with the Arkham games and Matt Reeves' Batman. He's someone to look up to no matter what age, and I think that's something really special about Batman. Well, that's why I think we love Batman so much, and if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate you dropping a like and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Beings, if you're out there, show us a sign. What if I just turn around right now and see Bat?